Hey everyone, welcome to Tales in Text, and I'm your host Nisha, and welcome to another episode of Expressions of Tarot. And I know it's been a while, but hey, better late than never, right? So, Expressions of Tarot actually started with a thought that I would discuss a single card and how that tarot card expresses itself or manifests itself in our day-to-day lives or in the world around us. But over the past couple of weeks, I found that the more I tried to explore the archetype of a single card, that narrative would almost always inevitably lead me to another card, which once again, brings us to the reality that the tarot cards don't function in isolation. That is, a single card doesn't function in isolation. A tarot is like a tapestry, it's like a puzzle, it's like a jigsaw, and all the cards indicate different archetypes and have different roles to play, and one always leads into the other, and they all have a way of manifesting or expressing themselves in specific life events or experiences in a beautiful collaborative integrated way. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So that's when I decided that for my next episode of Expressions of Tarot, I would shift gears a little bit and talk about a bunch of cards together, and instead of just a single card, and let's just see how it goes. I mean, I'm not going to abandon the reading and understanding and exploring the archetype of a singular card, but I would also like to take a look at how different cards work together, in specific circumstances, or the roles they play and the roles they play specifically in my life. And yeah, let's just go from there. So in today's video of Expressions of Tarot, I wanted to talk about the tarot fatigue that inevitably sets in for every person who reads tarot or performs any sort of cartomancy at least once in their life, if not multiple times. Now, I'm someone who has struggled with tarot fatigue multiple times, and I've been dedicated to tarot, then I've felt that fatigue and just gotten away from it for a little while, then come back again, then again felt fatigued and got back, and then just sort of back and forth multiple times. And I thought this would be a good place to sort of explore the expressions of tarot, because recently I've been going through a tarot slump, and it's been at least a little over a month and a half since I've even picked up any deck. And even when I do try to just pull a few cards, it just sort of feels forced. And so for the past month, maybe more, I've sort of kept my cartomancy practice on the back burner and just gone on with my life. And so this morning, it was around 3:50 in the morning. I woke up feeling really dejected. I just felt this sudden loss emotionally, that spiritual connection, because obviously as tarot practitioners, we practice this form of spirituality because it has given something beneficial or good or healing, supportive to our lives, right? And so I felt that sudden loss in the morning, and I knew that my practice and my cards were just calling back to me and saying, hey Nisha, you know what, it's time to come back and pick up that deck. So I legit rolled out of bed at 3:50 in the morning. I opened the cupboard where I have kept my tarot cards, and I picked up my, what I call my soul deck, which is the Spirit Sound Tarot. And I call it my soul deck because that deck always has a way of sort of reaching into my very soul and just bringing up the messages that I absolutely need to listen to at that particular moment. And it's a deck that is just super sensitive, and it's very mature, very empathetic, and I just love it. And so I picked up that deck, I just shuffled it a bunch of times, and I just pulled out a couple of cards, and oh my god, this has been one of the most interesting and intense readings ever. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get a little candid on camera and talk to you about the cards that I received and how this pertains to me and my tarot fatigue, and how I can make my way back to a more consistent practice from this. And I hope that, you know, this spread that I'm just going to be discussing sort of shows you that, you know what, it's okay to feel fatigued. It's okay to kind of want to take a step back from your spiritual practice and not want to do to kind of practice it every single day. That's perfectly fine. But when do you need to kind of pull up your socks and say, hey, you know what, I think now it's sort of becoming unsustainable. This fatigue is being unsustainable, and we need to take more concrete action, mindful action, to bring ourselves back into spiritual alignment. And I don't intend this video to be any sort of life lesson or any sort of you know, I don't know, to have any sort of moral, nothing like that. I just want to be candid and just talk about this because I know that a lot of people, like I said, are experiencing this cartomancy fatigue, and I hope this helps you in any way you want it to help. Otherwise, I hope it just entertains you. All right. So the very first card that I mean, the question that I asked when I was pulling the cards is, why am I finding, you know, my basically about my relationship with the tarot. Why do I find myself going to it and then like kind of dropping the ball, and then again going back to it, and then severing ties, again going back to it, again severing ties, so multiple times? Why does that keep happening? The next question I asked was, what can I do to kind of stop this process, or to at least change it? You know, because I know that no matter what happens, that fatigue will inevitably come back sometime in the future. But how do you make sure that, how do I make sure that I don't kind of stay in this, stagnate in this space of not at all using my cards ever, but I kind of learn from these experiences and try to make that rest period, that detachment period from cartomancy, to be effective, but also not as long, because in my case it can go on for months and months. So how do I make sure that this sort of severing of the connection between me and my practice doesn't happen too frequently and doesn't stay too long? Then I pull two cards to basically, you know, asking advice from my cards and from the universe as to how I can navigate the current fatigued situation that I am in. Am I doing something wrong? Has it now moved from a sense of fatigue to a sense of laziness, where I don't want to pick it up because I'm just sort of used to not using the cards anymore for the past month and a half? And so and I just wanted to kind of wrap it up with the fourth card, you know, any sort of spiritual advice that the universe had for me. So that is basically the overview of the spread that I used. So the very first card that I actually pulled for, you know, what my relationship with the tarot is the Page of Pentacles. So the Page of Pentacles is actually a really, you know, lovely card for me, and it just kind of really hits the mark on the head for me. Mainly because, you know, when it comes to tarot, I have these like big monumental ideas. You know, for me they're kind of monumental, like, you know, I have these big goals that I want to kind of fulfill. I create these resolutions for myself, saying, hey, you know what, this is my tarot resolution for the year, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and I am going to do it in this particular time. So I have these like grand ideas, but you know, when I start, it starts with full steam, but it sort of tapers off a little later. So, you know, a few weeks or a few months might go by, and I have, you know, complete passion and commitment to the goals and the ideas that I've kind of set for myself. But then this sort of passion wanes. It doesn't mean that I don't like the practice, it's just that I am not as committed to passionately fulfilling it as I was initially when the idea came about. And so for me, the Page of Crystals is really that, whenever I think of the pentacles or crystals suit, I for some reason I always imagine a sculptor. I know it's the weirdest thing, but I always imagine a sculptor, and probably because sculptor works with a lot of the earth, metals, mud, and things like that. So it could be because of that. But when I visualize a Page of Crystals or a Page of Pentacles, I visualize this apprentice who is, or rather, someone who is young, who's really interested in this field, and who sporadically has these really creative moments, and they create these works of art that are brilliant, but they just don't have that dedication that is required of an artist in training or of a professional artist. Their heart is in the right place, but the execution is still lacking or wanting, because they don't really understand about the requirement for consistency, the requirement for practice and patience, and rather they are more focused on those bursts of creativity. So to me, this kind of revealed that when I work with the tarot, I get super excited with an idea that I have, and I really want to make it happen at that moment. And whatever happens in that moment and those few days, weeks, or months following it, that's great. But then a new idea of the tarot kind of jumps into my head, and I kind of lose track of this one, and I want to jump on that bandwagon. I've given it a lot of thought, and I did start taking astrology kind of lessons, you could call it, by listening to the astrology podcast and using my birth chart and learning how to analyze my chart. And I feel like this is my Gemini ascendant. I have an ascendant in Gemini, I have a moon in Pisces, and I have a sun in Virgo. So I feel like this card really represents my ascendant in Gemini, because Geminis, they're known for being those souls who kind of are pretty kind of like jumping from one project to another. They're super excitable, they get excited, they're passionate and committed at that moment, but then they're very keen on switching gears and keeping things interesting and not kind of following through on that track. So I feel like I'm not trying to have an astrological cop out here, like I'm not trying to use astrology as an excuse, but I can kind of see where this relationship, kind of that foundation, that personality wise might stem from. But this has really given me a good insight into how I can view my practice, and as a and kind of try to move from this kid who's interested in sculptors or being a sculptor, and trying to become a truly committed apprentice or a professional artist, who knows how to get things done and how to be consistent, how to be true to the art form, no matter what the challenges are, no matter how much time it takes to reach that level of professionalism and finesse. So this was my first card. The next question, like I mentioned, was about how can I sort of navigate this experience that I'm having with the tarot, like my relationship with the tarot. And the card that I pulled, interestingly, was the Eight of Crystals. I know all of you tarot folks are like, oh my god, I saw this coming, right? It's like the universe was like, girl, what did you expect? So I feel like, I love the imagery of the bull for the, or the wildebeest, or whatever you like to call it, for the Eight of Crystals, because it kind of really shows that kind of that strength, that firmness, holding your ground, staying true to whatever it is you're doing, and diligently chipping away at that work and doing that thing. The bull also kind of reminds me of the Taurian energy, and therefore in turn Venus energy, because Venus rules Taurus. I'm sorry, correct, Venus rules Taurus. And Venus is all about things you're passionate about, things you love. It's about immersing yourself in what you love and taking the time to really feel and experience it. And Taurus is always that, that sensory, I want to indulge myself in the things that I love kind of a sign. And so the Eight of Crystals talks to me not only about having the dedication and discipline to kind of, I know that I have a tendency to be that eager, creative kid who's interested in art but doesn't have the discipline. But the Eight of Crystals tells me, hey, you know what, discipline is what needed. I think it's time to take that next step, to move into active apprenticeship, where you're held accountable for your actions, where you're held accountable, if not by somebody else, because a lot of us, many of us cartomancy practitioners, we don't have a support structure in terms of reading tarot or oracle or any other thing in our personal lives, because we might be in the closet, or we might just not have other fellow tarot readers to kind of support us. But to hold ourselves accountable to being disciplined and to remaining consistent and committed to the practice. So slow and steady, keep going strong. And I think the Eight of Crystals, especially in the form of a buffalo or a wildebeest, really talks of the strength that you already have, the inner strength and the ability, and just the thick skin to sort of brush off any challenges that we come across when we're trying to either learn cartomancy or to practice cartomancy daily, or to infuse it into our day-to-day lives. So and also the inner strength and the stability. I think stability is something that I really associate with both the Eight of Crystals and with the animal, which is the bull or the wildebeest. So to have to kind of move from that kind of shaky ground where I'm excitable and just moving helter-skelter, to kind of putting down roots, to chiseling up and kind of giving shape to that amorphous ideas, and to kind of building them into a proper shape. I hope you're kind of getting understanding what I'm getting at. So I feel like this card really kind of has a beautiful practical lesson, because the Eight of Crystals is all about practicality. We start out with these grand ideas, these grand plans, and a lot of these plans take a lot of hard work, commitment, and patience to fulfill, and that's what the Eight of Crystals tells me. All right, so the next card I pulled was basically, like, why does this keep happening, and am I doing something wrong? Because like I mentioned that I've had these instances of fatigue where I've sort of kind of cut my connection with tarot and oracle, and kind of like separated from it for a couple of months and then come back. And I always believe that that kind of separation is okay, it's healthy, because constantly trying to force ourselves to do something just because it looks good, or like the optics are good, or because everyone says what a real tarot reader doesn't ever feel fatigued by tarot. I don't think that's true. I think boredom and that lacuna is just something completely normal, natural, and human. And so it's okay to kind of feel jaded by whatever practice it is, and not just cartomancy. It could be anything. For example, if you're a runner, there might be times in your life when you feel like, hey, I just want a break from running, and you might take a month or 2 months break from running. But if you're really passionate about it, you would want to get back to it at some point. But it's completely healthy and okay and normal to want to take that break, because sometimes taking that break gives you perspective. It allows you to kind of do a maintenance check of yourself, whether it's physically or emotionally or spiritually. Do that maintenance check and just sort of get yourself back in alignment, especially in places that you've ignored in favor of that hobby or that practice that you have been committed to for such a long time. So I'm a huge supporter of taking that break. But I really wanted to know, why is it that, whenever I take that break, it sort of kind of spirals out of control from being a few days to a few weeks to a few months. So I kind of wanted some insight into what exactly is going on. And the card that I got was the Four of Feathers, which is the Four of Swords. Isn't this such a cute image? The bear just sleeping. So this card is really interesting because I have a really nice and interesting story about this card, right? So the Four of Feathers was a card that I drew a month and a half ago when I was feeling really disconnected from the tarot. And at that time, I took it to mean that, hey, I need that break, I need that rest. And so for me, that card took on a meaning of kind of spiritual relaxation, not being so all up into my cartomancy practice, not being super, super focused and hyper focused and engaged in the meaning of what my spreads are, or how it affects my life and things like that. So I just kind of felt like, what, I think it's time to just kind of take a step back and just go with the flow, and like put cartomancy on the back burner, because hey, what, I think I need a mental break. I think I need a break from constantly looking up at my cards for signs or for meanings or for omens and things like that. So I took it as a positive sign for rest. And it's very interesting that the same card pops up right now, because when I look at this card, it reminds me at this moment, currently today, that how rest can easily sort of mutate into something that is negative for you. Somewhere, as they say, too much of something isn't a good thing. Too much of something is actually a bad thing. So in this case, having that break, having that rest, having that separation isn't actually helpful, because now you're rested, but now you're kind of like being like bleh about that practice. I wouldn't go so far as saying that rest in its extreme it results in sloth, because that's not the case, at least at this moment. But I would say that when you rest a little too much, and you kind of lose that momentum to pick things up again, because it happens, right? Like, and you're kind of going on autopilot right now, because you're that's one of the ways I view this card. It's kind of like you're putting things on autopilot because you just kind of want to disengage mentally, physically, and just let things flow. And so you recuperate. So you put things on autopilots for a little longer than intended, or you should have. And so now it's kind of like you're feeling like, ugh, do I need to kind of pick up the reins again? I mean, that kind of tussle, internal tussle between wanting to do something, but being too much in your comfort zone, being all too rested and relaxed, and just feeling super lazy to kind of pick things up, like moving from autopilot to conscious driving. So it's interesting that I found this card for this, because I think that's exactly what's happening. Like, when you feel super, like in this time of spiritual rest, in this time of spiritual, sort of a hermit mode, you could say, it can get a little hard to come back out because you're so used to the comfortable setting of, I'm just gonna go with the flow, I'm just gonna be chill about it, I'm not going to put in that effort right now, because hey, what, I'm having such a good time being this relaxed. And so I think this card was trying to tell me that it's important to kind of notice when a healthy period of rest turns into something that can potentially be unhealthy. So I think that was a good way of looking at how the same card, which can actually have a very positive meaning a lot of times, can actually have or be a warning, or that perhaps what, you should get yourself out of autopilot and actually mindfully start practicing whatever it is. I think it's time to kind of rejoin the world and not be that hermit anymore, not be not be disinterested anymore, and to kind of just start up the activity. So yeah, and the final card that I drew was, is there any spiritual message from the universe? Now that I've realized, like how my tarot fatigue actually kind of ebbs and flows, what is the message from the universe, overall message from the universe at this moment for me right now? And I got awakening, which is another name for the card judgment. So I find this card super interesting and very nice, because judgment isn't, a lot of times people have the misconception that judgment is about judging yourself or judging someone harshly. And what, given our discussion on tarot fatigue, it could be like you should judge yourself harshly, and get into this harsh reality that hey, you've kind of taken too long a break, so get back in the game. I think personally for me, judgment is about reaching for your higher self. It's sort of like the, if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I would say judgment kind of is in the self-actualization, the topmost part of the pyramid, self-actualization phase. It's about reaching for your highest good. It's about doing something that is is very good for you holistically, and which challenges you, but which also has a very good payoff. It has a very good reward. And judgment to me is a lot about, at this stage and in this current context, a lot about spiritual evolution. So I think what this card was trying to say was, you know what, like, I think this period of rest has been good. It's given you some perspective, and now that you know what you want, I think it's a good time to upskill or kind of move up the ladder spiritually speaking. Perhaps get a deeper understanding of the tarot, or perhaps start using it in ways that you haven't used it before, or look at kind of moving up the spiritual scale and using a tarot as a support or a guide for your day-to-day life. So I think this card is pretty promising, and it talks of, sure, you might have to face some uncomfortable situations, you might have to take some decisions, or experience emotions that might be challenging, but you know what, judgment always has a good payoff if you stick with it, because it's all about transforming from one state to another. It's all about, because if you look at the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith card, it's about there's an angel and there's also the earthly plane, right? It's about ascension. So ascending from where you currently are to another layer or another level, which will bring you new life lessons and new life experiences. And so that's something really good. And I feel like, I think overall, I think this process is going to be good and sustainable. I have hope and I have faith that that things are going to be super sustainable. And while there might be more episodes of tarot fatigue in the future, which is perfectly fine, I think overall, committing to the tarot, committing to cartomancy shouldn't be too much of a problem, because like I mentioned, right, I have a moon in Pisces, and Pisces is a sign of essentially of spirituality, of liminal experiences, liminal spaces, liminal practices. So Pisces is all about spirituality. And I have a sun in Virgo, and Virgo is all about commitment, practice, dedication, holding on to schedules, or organizing and planning your activities in a way where you commit to it and you get things done. Virgo is a perfectionist. So although I have an ascendant in Gemini, I think I have enough support through my sun and moon signs to kind of help me tide through these experiences, right? So yeah, that kind of brings me to the end of this video. I know I've been super candid, and I feel like the tarot community is such a sweet community compared to because online spaces can be really, really rude and just not supportive. But overall, my experience over the years has been pretty good with the tarot community, and I know that a lot of people are so supportive and so kind and so empathetic. So yeah, it gives me a lot of courage and freedom to kind of come up and just have an honest conversation. So yeah, there you go. And with this video of Expressions of Tarot, I have officially left my period of lacuna and boredom and inactivity, especially in the sphere of tarot, behind, and I have jumped right into tarot, and I'm super happy. Making this video has brought me a lot of joy, and pulling out cards has brought me even greater happiness. All right, so let me know in the comments below, are you going through a tarot dry spell, a tarot fatigue scenario right now? What have you done in the past to kind of work through this? What are your tips and suggestions? Do you have a specific spread that you use to kind of bring yourself back into alignment with your practice? Just let me know what you think and what your personal experiences are. I would love to know. All right, if you stuck around with me so far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Tales in Text. Bye bye.